Hello, welcome to the second episode of Catch Up to Contenders. And with me today, for starters, we're going to be talking about Korea. You should have been able to guess it by the folks on your screen. They are the voices of Korean Overwatch, Achilles and Proxy Wolf, who have been holding down the fort, keeping up the Apex days, the glory days, as Papa Smithy was calling them on Twitter recently. And every other fan seems to as well. Every other fan that likes to brag about the fact that they were there in the old days. And Benchmob as well, who is a guy who I've run into a couple of times who watches, as I was saying earlier to Achilles and Proxy, watches far more Overwatch than is humanly healthy. He's watching every streamer every hour of the day, it seems, and somehow still keeping up with his job and somehow still writing articles. How do you physically do that? I want to learn your secret.
Have multiple screens up at work and have bosses who are okay with me watching that while I'm doing work. It's probably because I'm doing esports work at work that it filters into the job. But yeah,
I see. You get away with it.
I do.
All right. So my first question, because I don't think that Achilles and Wolf need too much of an introduction, is guys, you've been casting contenders for a long time over there. You casted the previous season, now it's into the next one, and I'm enjoying it whenever I get to tune in. As much as the Overwatch League, but if people haven't watched any of the Contenders Korea, why should they watch it? Like, what reasons should people have for watching Contenders Korea?
I'm gonna treat this like a Contenders broadcast, and I'm gonna let Wolf go and just do all the analytics on this.
I mean, Korea is usually like a pretty fast-paced meta. We're moving into a little bit less of a fast-paced meta right now, but last season, for example, we had the crazy Sombra meta. And in Korea, usually everyone kind of moves towards like hyper carry type stuff, whether it's like Dragon Blades, back in the Apex season 1, 2, 3 era with nano boosts, or the Sombra meta where you have an EMP that changes everything, and then the counterplay becomes around the supports and stuff like that. I think it's a really exciting region to watch because it's very fast paced. The observing is also a little bit different than Overwatch League. It tries to showcase like a little bit more first person views, which I think isn't necessarily like the best thing for every viewer. I'm not trying to say that like the Contenders or Apex observing style is necessarily better than the Overwatch League one, but if you like to watch that kind of thing, then you'll see a lot more of it in Korea. But I think there's a lot of history in the Korean scene with teams like RunAway, Kongdoo Panthera, for example, GC Busan, and all the Overwatch League players came from this region. Not all of them, but about half of them. Say.
Only mild hyperbole.
if you want to like see the region where all these players came from and sort of get involved in the history of the Korean scene, Achilles and I talk about the Apex days a lot. And I do really recommend that people go back and watch the Apex VODs. There's been a lot of talk about that on the subreddit recently about, I never watched Apex. I don't understand what's going on. What do I do? Just go watch some of the VODs. Maybe just even watch the finals or the semifinals of every season. And you'll see a lot of your favorite players from Overwatch. They can be like, oh, I didn't know he was on this team. I didn't know where he came from. And as Contenders continues, like season 1 and season 2, we've already had a few players from season 1 pulled into season 1 of Overwatch League towards the end, like stage 3, stage 4. As season 2 approaches, Overwatch League season 2 and Contender season 2 is kind of getting close to the end, a lot of the players that are playing right now will be in Overwatch League for sure. So if you want to be like the cool guy who knows where they're from, what their playstyle is, like how they played on their team before they got big, before they got famous, then you can kind of be that hipster too if you watch Korea.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen from NYXL, Seoul, and of course, Jack taking two full teams. Like
he was greedy.
There's also a very high chance that more of that happens. So people are gonna have their eyes on teams like Element Mystic, who are like strong performers. Maybe even like Kongdoo Panthera again might just have their entire team like sought to purchase. But I think RunAway is gonna be a big one because of how marketable they are. And like Wolf said, like if you go back and you watch all the VODs, you'll see a lot of RunAway if you watch the finals. And you'll probably find out like why they're such a beloved team, not just in Korea, but kind of like around the world. They're outside of Overwatch League, probably the most well-known organization in Overwatch right now.
Yeah, it's got a ton of narratives throughout the entire scene, and like you were saying, it's really fast tempo as well, so it's really exciting to watch. I think it's the highest skilled region outside of the Overwatch League as well, right? If you want to watch like really high skilled Overwatch, while the Overwatch League is actually not going at the moment, I think Contenders Korea would be your first port of call. The teams are and the players are good enough to go into Owl, some of them, and so the teams are really fantastic. Some of the strategy you see, it's very gripping in that sense as well, I think, right?
Yeah. I'd also
Yeah.
say that what's really cool about Contenders Korea is the teams that come up from trials. Like, there's some inconsistency with how they do, but there's a ton of teams in the open division, I think is what the official like pre-trials thing is called, the open division. I think for the first season before we had season 1 of Contenders Korea, like 1,000 teams signed up for the qualifiers.
That's
So like
bananas.
1,000 different teams. And one of them was Fat Cat, right? Which then became Intro Wave, which is now GC Busan Wave. They've been playing for a long time, but they never really got their shot, for example. So there's a ton of teams in the Korean scene that don't really exist, I think, in the public eye to a lot of people. But if whole teams get taken away, like Achilles was saying, like for example, Kongdoo Panthera gets taken away, or RunAway gets taken away, or Element Mystic gets taken away, a lot of people I think would look at the league and be like, well, now it's just not worth it. Like all the good teams are gone. But we've already seen like the rise of a lot of sudden teams that like again were good, but no one knew about them. Like Element Mystic, for example, GC Busan Wave now is doing really, really well. Those teams, because of the kind of contenders format with relegations and trials, like new teams will replace them. And I think the region is always going to be strong because there's always like those new, young, hungry players that want to get to the top. They want to, go to Overwatch League, right, where there's a ton of money to be had. And the orgs, of course, want to kind of support that so they can sell their players for proper money and stuff. But this is like a league that's on TV in Korea. Like it's broadcast on a sports channel in television. So a lot of young Koreans in Korea, a lot of the misconception is that families are totally cool with esports. That's not really true. But if you can say that your esport league is on TV, then your parents, your grandparents, whatever, are super cool with that because they can turn their TV on and watch it because they don't know how to do Twitch and stuff.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think the level of play in Korea is really high, but there's always a lot of talent that's really hungry that wants to take those spots. So even if some of these teams go away because they go into Overwatch League, for example, I think they'll always be replaced by teams that want to be the best.
Yeah, having it on NBC especially is like really, really big because it's like a very well-known, very respected like television station. And I remember telling my landlord, he was like, "Oh, how is work going?" And I was like, "Oh, it's good. I just started working for NBC." And she's like, "NBC, really? Oh my god, okay. Like, I'm glad that you're staying here. Like, I'm definitely getting my rent. Like, you're never gonna miss a payment. Like, they're a great company to work for." I'm just like, "Yeah, don't worry, man. Like, it's gonna be good."
So it's a bit of like a side tangent, which isn't really for any new viewers. This is just for my own curiosity. Was this then an improvement in terms of the publicity for the league over it being broadcast by OGN before? Because I remember that was like a weird move because it had been with OGN for so long in terms of Overwatch right from the beginning. People were wondering what the change would be. Has it actually just been a positive thing?
Wolf could probably speak more to that from the Korean side of things and their reaction.
I think like the reactions to that are a little bit mixed. I think a lot of people were excited to have it on a more mainstream type media because NBC Sports +2 is a channel. So there's a lot of sports channels in Korea, right? This is not this is not like it's on ESPN. It's kind of like how Overwatch League is on ESPN, but it's not the primary broadcast that's on ESPN that day. So I think a lot of people were excited that it was on a more mainstream media. But because OGN, was the company that kind of made Korean Overwatch like from the beginning and made Apex, like a lot of people are disappointed that that Apex was discontinued. So I guess there's a lot of mixed feelings in that regard. But I think the fans kind of overall, like I was kind of worried that the fans might not jump onto it because there's a new production company, but I think everyone's kind of just poured it over for the most part. The only thing that we're missing really is the Lunatic High fans because there's no Lunatic High anymore over at Seoul Dynasty, and we know how that's going.
Yeah.
Not very well.
Are there any Lunatic High fans anywhere anymore after their season this time?
They all went to watch the KSV teams for PUBG, and I watch Eska still.
That's true. Yeah, people watching Eska and just cheering for KSV Gold and Black over there in PUBG.
So you talked a bit about the fast tempo that we normally see in the previous Sombra meta. What are you seeing in this season of Contenders? What if you had your finger on the pulse on the meta in Korea? How would you describe it, but potentially as it compares to Overwatch League?
So Wolf does get to watch a little bit more Overwatch League than I do because I wake up late. But one of the biggest things that I've noticed about this meta compared to especially the Sombra meta in the past is that there's actually a lot of diversity coming through right now. We're seeing the resurgence of Ana. with, you know, nano blades and stuff like that coming back through. There's still people playing dive. Like, teams have basically acknowledged, like, okay, our dive is so good that their Brigida doesn't even matter anymore, and they'll actually just force it in, and they'll just focus Brigida, Tracer, Pulse Bombs her, kills her, and then the Genji just wipes up everybody else with the Dragon Blade. So we're seeing Ana coming back in. We have, of course, the, you know, the Goats comp that people have been playing a lot. But we're also seeing like tricklings back in of like other heroes that haven't been seen in a while, such as Doomfist, which has been coming back in. Summon has been playing that as of late, and he's been doing really well with it. Other people are starting to pick it up, such as Edison on GC Busan Wave. And you're just seeing this, you know, Doomfist. It feels like released Doomfist when he was just absolutely busted, had the wider rocket punch range and stuff, because you're just seeing him fill the entire kill feed as it goes on.
I mean, I think Achilles is all the big points, but my feeling about this meta is I feel like every team is trying to find out the answer to Reinhardt Zarya and, of course, other variations thereof, but no one's quite figured it out yet. Like, Doomfist has been attempted. We've seen the Ana come through. We've seen a lot of Orisa even on attack to try to kind of disrupt the setup that the Zarya Reinhardt has. Widow is falling down a little bit in priority in Korea because it's just difficult to get headshots onto, you know, Reinhardt Zarya example. For example, you know, we see Widow occasionally like used on attack Hanamura because you try to flank if they're running the Reinhardt Zarya defense. One thing I noticed a lot though is right now I feel like the attacking team has such a huge advantage in Korea because say like you're defending Hanamura point A and you're going for like the Junkrat Orisa comp. You're kind of assuming that's kind of the catch-all defense because it could be the Goats comp as it's called. It could be attack Hanzo with Reinhardt Zarya. It could be a Winston dive comp with Genji Tracer. It could be the backdoor Tracer strat we've seen where everyone hides and shows themselves a little bit on the left side. The Tracer goes onto the point, avoids the Orisa setup, and then forces everyone to reposition. Then they dive in. So you're kind of like, what are they running? I have no idea. Whereas the attacking team can, you know, just drop a translocator in the spawn, run over there, say, oh, okay, they did the Orisa defensive setup, translocate back, set up an attacking position, etc. So it feels kind of frustrating, I think, as defenders right now in this meta on especially assault maps because, you know, I think the best counter to the Reinhardt Zarya like Goat style composition is to run yours because you have the defender's advantage. You have a choke point you can work around. You should theoretically, unless you totally mess it up, be able to build ults faster and then have the ult advantage that way. But if you're trying to run a Orisa Junkrat, for example, you could get outpositioned because your comp isn't mobile. They have a Lucio on the other side. They sneak around. So I feel like everyone's trying to counter the Reinhardt Zarya meta, but no one really knows exactly the best way to do it. So everyone's just kind of running it. And we're seeing these small variations like the Doomfist coming in, the Ana coming in. But it does feel bad right now to be, I think, a defending team on Assault because we've seen so many times teams just get totally crushed. We see a lot of double caps right now in Korea because your comp gets countered. You smash them on A, you walk to B with like 4 to 6 ults. And during the longer fight with your tank comp on B, you just end up with a grab surge and earth shatter, nano boost, etc., and you just cap B. So yeah, I think that kind of like is the at least my feel on the pulse of the meta right now.
And Benchmark, you've watched a number of the games in Korea as well as the Overwatch League, and you've written a little bit about the metas that we saw developing as well. What's your feel on it and how it compares to the other regions?
So I think that in Korea, as we've already been talking about, it's faster paced. It's been that way for a very long time. I think one of the biggest differences that I see though is in support compositions. I think in Western Overwatch, we tend to see that we talk a lot about fast or slow compositions, and in Korea, I think what we see is that they don't necessarily prioritize sustained healing, whereas in Overwatch League, you see a lot of Mercy, you see a lot of Mercy, Moira, Mercy, Zen, and in Korea, we've seen a lot of like Lucio, Ana attempts to focus target down, get a purple nade in there, and focus the target down before the healers even have a chance to heal. I think there's been a bit more diversity from the support perspective. I also think that we're seeing like Wolf said, we're seeing a lot of Rein Zarya, and I think that's one of the reasons that teams who, even though we're seeing a lot of diversity between dive and slower tank compositions, I think that the teams that are simply prioritizing the tankier compositions, for example, like Kongdoo Panthera, are finding a lot of success. And really, it's going to. I think what's going to be interesting going into the playoffs is watching teams sort of knowing that that certain teams are stronger in those tankier compositions, watching opponents who might lose the first map counter pick against your Rialtos or your King's Rows, try and put teams that are tankier or more comfortable on that into situations where they have to play dive more. I think that's probably the biggest difference that we're seeing between those two. I also think that in Korea right now, the teams that are more versatile, the individual players are able to flex more between different heroes, even between different roles. We see, for example, like Ding on Kongdoo Panthera, we see flex between a lot of Diva, Pharah. We see Edison and Alpha Yi on GC Busan flex between a whole different number of DPS heroes and tanks. And then by that same number, I think we're teams that in the past were really strong in like the Tracer Widow meta. So like, for example, X6, I think they're having difficulty now because you're asking the teams, you're asking your DPS players to, we were talking about like Widowmakers having a difficult time playing in this tank heavy meta, not being able to get headshots and such. And teams that were somewhat reliant on the Widow Tracer dive style in the past, who don't have the capacity to flex their DPS players onto different heroes or different roles, I think are having a lot of trouble in Korea right now.
Yeah, I would second a lot of that. Like, for example, Guard, it took him pretty much the entire group stage to, I think, really get comfortable playing the Tracer. Like, he was playing it a little bit at the beginning, but it was weak, and he pulled the Genji out once, but it didn't look very strong. Because obviously, for those who haven't watched Season 2 yet, Sparkle has been kind of, like, benched until further notice, I guess is the best way to put it, by
the organization
Element
has
Mystic.
sat him off the starting roster.
Yeah, so he won't be playing this season. So that's kind of like a role that Element Mystic kind of set up the way that 3 DPS players are played in Korea, where you have like one Genji Junkrat player, you have a hit scan player, and then you have like a Sombra Tracer specialist. And for Element Mystic, it was always the Sombra. But yeah, Guard struggled to flex at the beginning, so Element Mystic looked a little bit weaker, but now they're looking stronger. You have players like Youngjin who can play like literally every hero, I'm pretty sure. Maybe not like healers, but he's pretty much played literally everything.
Bumper
in
over
fact,
the last
like,
couple of seasons has literally played everything as well. I think
Yeah,
he's played every role because he played Lucio for a while as well, and Anna.
yeah. So players like Youngjin like are considered to be like, a lot of the Korean commentators think Youngjin's the best Brigitte player in Korea right now. And I don't know what you guys feel about Brigitte. I don't like calling her a support because she's like a support and a tank and like an initiator. But the Korean commentators like will religiously call her a support. But yeah, your DPS players have to be able to play Hanzo well, Widow well, Tracer, Brigitte. Because if you can't play all of those heroes, then you're gonna get countered in composition. There's a lot of counters, I think, in this meta right now. And I feel like it's kind of like the dream of the designers, and the producers of Overwatch were like, yeah, we're gonna have the competitive game where people are gonna switch heroes all the time. Because now we are seeing heroes switch like every checkpoint a lot of the time. Sometimes you'll see players switch onto Brigitte to counter a Genji that they expect to be swapped to, but the other player doesn't even pick the Genji because they've already predicted that the Brigitte swap will come through, and they don't want to deal with that. So, but it is, Achilles mentioned earlier, a lot of teams are kind of figuring out how to kill the Brigitte if it's not a strong Brigitte player with the Dragon Blade, like dash through, then pull the blade and swing around and kill them, with everyone else focusing on the Brigitte at the same time, and then you don't have to worry about the stun. So yeah, there's a lot of people, I think, trying in Korea to flex the different roles to try to figure out, how do I deal with the mess that is this meta right now? Because in Korea before, like last season, we had a super figured out meta. Like you could tell, you could be blindfolded, have the team bars at the top of the screen blocked out, and you would know on any map at any point what everyone was playing, what the game was going to look like. And it was just pure mechanical skill. Like, how do the EMPs go off? How's the flanking? How long can the Sombra survive? How quickly does the Sombra build EMP? And then how do the supports play around that? And how good is the tanks diving? And it was just like, that's it. It's simple. Whereas in this meta, there's a lot of like thinking that has to go on. And I think the coaching is super important in that regard as well, because the coaches are the ones that are going to look at the play, look at the teams and say, I think you guys are too pigeonholed on this, for example, or you need to be running something different.
And that kind of, I just want to go on like a little side tangent to go back to like your original question, Sideshow, like why should you watch Korean Contenders? And all of this, am I allowed to curse? Is this like a
This is not a PG-13 fucking podcast. No.
Okay, all right. All this shit that we've been talking about it culminates up. It combines with the other thing that is pretty unique to Korean Contenders, where every map is available. We started off the season Rialto's in the game. It can be picked. You play 4 maps guaranteed. 5th is Ilios as a tiebreaker, but every single other map in the game is eligible for pick. So not only do you have this very flowing dynamic meta where it's a lot of responsive swaps coming through. It's not that you run this comp because this is the best thing, like we've seen in the past. Like everything is always changing. But while all of that is going on, all of these teams are also practicing every single map in the game. And that's a relevant thing for teams to pull from if they're the losing squad, because then they get the map pick. So they say, know what? This team hasn't won on this map. So, like RunAway hasn't won on Hanamura. So maybe we should go to Hanamura. Or, oh man, they're really good at Volskaya. They're really good at Eichenwald now. So let's not go there. Let's go somewhere that we haven't seen them play yet. And that adds so much to the excitement when you see a map pick comes out, or when somebody makes a really stupid map pick, Kings Row from the other day. But and you can see a team get punished. When you see a team get punished for that decision, like we could set it up and be like, wow, like Kings Row, they shouldn't do this because so and so is so good at playing this comp, and then they do it and they get smashed. We're like, well, that's exactly what we're talking about. That the teams have to be thinking about, and it helps as the audience watches and they learn more about these teams and their play styles and stuff. They'll be like, oh, you know what? Like they shouldn't do that map, or they should do that one. That's like their best thing.
Yeah, Achilles and I actually, so last season, for most of the season, we got the maps given to us. So the teams will like have maps they are planning on picking if they lose, right? For example, if you lose control, what hybrid map do you want to pick? And they like have it listed. They don't have to necessarily pick those maps, but that was given to us last season. For most of the regular season, but we told NBC actually that we preferred not to be told, which actually really baffled them a lot. But I told them, like in Achilles as well, we were like, for the show, it feels like somewhat disingenuous if we predict the map on the show when we already know what it is. And also, like, I think when I don't know what the map is like at all, it makes it more interesting to kind of like discuss what they might be doing, because we always see substitutions before the map as well. Sometimes you can see a sub, and then you can speculate, what does this sub mean? Where might they want to take us? And then it kind of sets up this discussion on the broadcast about like what comps they want to run, because they brought this player, so they probably want to go to this map, for example. And then sometimes just totally wrong, and we go to a different map and we learn something new. But usually it kind of sets up the expectation as to is this map correct? Like the Kings Row map you were talking about, Achilles, you and I saw it and we were like, this is the only wrong choice, et cetera, et cetera. And they just got smashed, like it wasn't even close. So yeah, that's like something that we like to focus on the broadcast about a lot, and I think it is really cool that literally every map is available all the time, because that's how the ranked ladder is right now. So if you want to have like a broadcast that kind of, if you're a ranked player, you're trying to learn more, you're watching Korea, it kind of feels relatable, right? Because every single map is available.
I think
I understand with like
the depth of the broadcast.
With the schedule for Overwatch League, it doesn't make sense necessarily to have every map available, though, I think, because you're playing a lot of games and it's like a really long tournament. But for Korea, I think it's pretty cool.
I'd love to be privy to that speculation when RunAway announces that Hooreg's coming in.
Oh, God.
God bless Hooreg. I was talking about him on my stream, actually. He is a bot in the loveliest way possible, He's just like...
I feel so bad for him.
He's a clockwork human. You wind him up and you let him go and you hope he does the right thing. You have to give him a bit of guidance if he runs into the wall again and again.
Yeah, it's just...
I actually just recently, the other night, the same night that he played, and RunAway almost... They did end up losing the series, spoiler alert, but that was the moment where everyone's like, I cannot believe that they did this. I went back and watched the Apex Season 4 finals, because I was like, was Hooreg always bad? Like, I need to remember.
What happened?
And
how did this occur?
He was really good on hit scan, like, and Soldier in particular was like his big go-to pick when he was playing on assault maps, for example. He'd always like flank and no one would track where he was, and then he would get big tack visors. He was really good at the Farah. He like basically single-handedly won Nepal in that grand finals for them with the Farah.
His Farah remained good in Overwatch League actually as well. It was like his only good hero.
And then like he's got a decent Doomfist, but it's like kind of irrelevant most of the time. But his Widow was never good, and it's just awful. Like when you compare him to like Stitch, you have like the gold medalist of Widows. Plus, he's a good McCree. Like, it begs the question, why did you even pick up Hooreg? You know, sometimes like it almost makes you wonder, like, oh, is Stitch already got like an Overwatch League deal or something? Like, what's going on? Why did you pick this guy up?
Yeah.
You have like one of the best hit scan players in Korea, and honestly would probably be like easily top 10 in Overwatch League, maybe even higher. You have an insanely good hit scan player, then you bring Hooreg in, and he's just underperforming, and then you sub him in consistently, and he just continues to consistently just totally miss all the marks. So I don't know exactly on with that decision, why he's being fielded like that, because I mean, nobody knows. But I mean, you can try to make the PC argument that I make on broadcast, like, oh, they're just trying to get him more experience. They're trying to get, you know, he's clearly got nerve issues right now. But I don't think that's it. I mean, he's played in front of the Apex Season 4 finals crowd. Like, he's been around, you know, and he's played at Overwatch League where there's a massive crowd, for example. I think the guy is just not good for the meta, and maybe he feels inadequate because he's next to Stitch. But just to talk about that point, I mean, I don't know what's going on, but I think we should see a little bit less of Hooreg as we head into playoffs.
It doesn't make that much sense to put him in. Sorry.
Go on.
Cut you off. Just because, like, you guys are talking about his Pharah being so good, but we always just see him go in and he just plays Widowmaker. And then Hoxall is the one playing the Pharah, because Hoxall doesn't really play hit scan at all. Like, he plays some Tracer now, like, that's coming into the mix. But, like, Hoxall is not a Widowmaker player. You know, you think of him and you think of his Genji. Now you think of his Pharah and his Junkrat a lot. So it's not like he's going to start picking up the Widowmakers. So it's like, why would you put them on at the same exact time? Like, if anything, maybe sub in Hooreg for Hoxall, have Stitch play Widowmaker, and then just put Hooreg on the Pharah, and maybe then it'll work. It just feels like they're mixing up the formula in the wrong way a little bit, and they're not giving him what he needs to succeed.
We started talking about RunAway here, so I want to hit some major storylines that have been running throughout this season of Contenders that I've been particularly interested in. Now, one of these is the RunAway even season kind of what's the opposite of a curse, like miraculous run that they've managed to do. Now, bear in mind, there's only been 2 previous even seasons, so this is not much of a pattern so far, but it's definitely kind of there. And I think the reason for this is RunAway just every other season they try to experiment and they fuck it all up, and this time it looks like they've experimented and they're actually coming out with some decent results. So is this RunAway's time? RunAway, the fan favorites, the always second place, never first place, sometimes shit the bed. Is this their time?
I mean, I want to say yes. Like, I want to say that they're gonna make it to the grand final again, but it also comes down to this, like, micro experimentation that they have going on right now, and whether or not that's going to flesh out or if they just stop it. Like, I think when we see like Somin Su come in, we can basically expect like they'll probably do pretty well. There's probably going to be a Doomfist that comes out at some point, and he's just going to clap everybody for a little bit, and then, you know, they probably win the map. But whenever we see Hooreg come in, or if it's the Hooreg Somin Su sub in, we kind of have to question it a little bit. So it's like, if they can find the way to make that work, like I said, I think if it's Hooreg in for Hoxall instead, maybe that finds success and RunAway can keep going where they look very good. But if stuff keeps happening, like it happened with Kongdoo Panthera, where they got reverse swept in the match to get first place in their group, then maybe it's not. But I want to say that it is, because I do love RunAway.
I feel like there's no way anyone could predict them to lose that Dorado map if they just have Stitch in against Kongdoo Panthera and they put Hooreg in. Last season, I felt like RunAway was a little bit bland. Like, Hoxall had really good EMPs on his Sombra, but otherwise he was pretty forgettable. And it was a really stagnant meta, and I think that's where RunAway struggles a lot, because they have a lot of different styles they can play. Like, they can put different players on the Pharah. Stitch can play Tracer, but he's also really good at hit scan. And they keep changing their support line a lot because they kind of change it to suit the meta, I think, and that's always been kind of a RunAway thing. I mean, they've probably seen like 10 support players by now, if not more, throughout their history. But this is the meta where I feel like, okay, there's a lot of variation in this meta. It should be theirs to take. And then they put Hooreg in and lose, and I'm like, well, I don't know. But I feel like the reason why they do well in varied metas is because they do experiment a lot, kind of going back to what you were saying, Sideshow. Like, they experiment a lot, they try a lot of things, and I think they do come out better for it. But it is usually the seasons where they win, where they are not experimenting, where they are kind of like okay, we've tried this, we've learned, this is not the way, or we've gained some benefits from these experiments we were running, like Haxal Lucio, who knows, but
that was a classic. That
season.
was absolutely classic. Popping Haxal and
Um,
Lucio at times was just mind-blowing to watch as well. And it's weird actually that they've had so much success over the course of such a long time, despite not keeping some kind of core to their roster other than Haxal and Stitch. Right? They've swapped out wholesale their tank line and their support line many times and kind of thrown people around from tank to support and stuff like that. And yet they still finding success. So they are learning as they go. It feels like machine learning with RunAway though. Like sometimes you'll just get an evolution. Like you see the thing where it just randomly makes cars and they try and drive along, and sometimes you'll
Yeah.
just get a RunAway car that plows into the wall or explodes or something. But it's all right because the next iteration of RunAway has learned from the fact that no, you shouldn't make a car with square wheels. So don't worry, we'll come out this season and maybe do something a bit better.
It also helps when they bring in replacements that are just straight up units. Like, I mean, Janu's probably one of the best D.Va players in Korea. Twilight, Bumper, surprisingly, is, I think, probably had the best main tank season of anyone in Korea right now, at least on. I mean, his Winston's just something to behold. So yeah, when you lose players and then bring in incredible talent to replace them, that helps as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I think Bumper's style is actually one that everyone should watch. Like, I think he's more aggressive than most Winston players in the world right now. And it's very hit or miss at the moment. Like, especially if he can get onto a Widowmaker who's in a room, for example, when it's Pharaoh Widow versus Pharaoh Widow, because he gets on top of these Widowmakers, pins them in and gets a kill and then leaves, or at least then prevents the Widow from being able to do anything in that moment. And that's when Stitch just kills the Pharaoh, kills the tank line that's trying to threaten him, or they just keep him alive, they keep Bumper alive, and then threaten the Widow so much that they gain a positional advantage from that. Obviously, if he doesn't kill the Widow, or the Widow just grapples away and then he doesn't do anything with that primal, he gets discorded and then he dies. And Slime is like, all right, thankfully I got my my res on cooldown. I'll just go over there and fix this problem, and then probably die trying. But like he's really, I think, pushing the envelope as to where Winston play can really go right now, because for a while it was like Miro's aggressive, he's got good dive. You got players like Gesture, like, oh, I placed my bubble better than you, I understand how to build ult charge better than you. And then there's like the evolution of how Primal Rage was used at first aggressively, then used as like a second health bar. Now I think we're going back to like aggression in Korea a little bit, instead of using it as just like, oh, I have a second health bar now and I can knock people off a card, I can knock people off a point. So yeah, I think Bumper is like the Winston to watch, even though sometimes like he does crash into the wall a little bit, as Sideshow is kind of alluding to the experimentation. When he does make a play work, it does look fantastic, it does look amazing. And I think that fine tuning, once he gets a little bit stronger at what he's trying to do on the Winston, that makes him so terrifying, because his Reinhardt is also good, his Orisa is also good, so he becomes just this fantastic, tough to deal with main tank.
He's very much like a fissure player for anyone who's familiar with Overwatch League. Extremely aggressive, and like Wolf was saying, his primal rages are really neat, because the way he goes in, like, this isn't, we're not talking about like Winston going in with a Tracer, Winston going in with a Genji. A lot of times he's just solo ulting aggressively in the back line, and the way he does it, he finds really he's really good at identifying enemy cooldown or enemy cooldown movement ability usage, and getting onto a Widow when she's just used a grapple, or after a Mercy's just used Guardian Angel, and pinning them into these scenarios where it's sometimes a small room or against a wall where there's just no escape for them. And even if he doesn't get the kill, just the amount of resources that in turn need to be poured into like a counterplay or a counter dive just to go back and peel for those support lines creates so much space for Stitch on the Widow.
Yeah, and if he does go forward with like that aggressive a play and he's like doing really well, you can also see how good the communication is on RunAway at times, because maybe the supports can't get into a position to actually like go to the Winston, and they start getting jumped on the point. Like a moment from, I think it was Ilios Ruins comes to mind, and Bumper was like overdoing his thing with the Primal Rage, and then on the last charge the call comes in, the supports are under fire, he immediately leaps over and just completely kills like the person who was like trying to kill his Mercy or whatever. As so like as soon as that retreat comes in, they're like, we need backup, he just instantly It just bounces his way back over there, instantly kills him, and the supports are like now just perfectly fine. They're alive, and they can just continue to hold the point from there.
Slime, I think, is the fucking best Mercy in Korea. Like, without Slime, these sorts of plays would not be possible.
His movement's so good.
He stays alive so long. It manages to damage boost whoever it is in like the best situation, right? So whether it's he's damage boosting Stitch because he's trying to help prevent tanks from approaching the point because they have control of the point, like on Control, for example, or he's damage boosting Haksal when he's on the Pharah, or he's saving Bumper, who's gone in at the wrong moment, then saving Haksal while Haxel's trying to stay alive in a Pharah duel where he's losing. Like, the guy it feels like he's everywhere. It feels like he's always got Valkyrie out, and his heals and his damage boosts are like connected to everybody because the guy is just insane. And he was a really controversial player in Korea because a lot of people said like, oh, he's just Lucio one trick. Because he played almost only Lucio for most of his time in like open division and in trials, for example. And Amy was the player that was considered to be much better and had the much larger hero pool and was much stronger. But I think now we can really see like what the coaching staff of RunAway saw in Slime. He's, I think, by far the best Mercy player in Korea right now. Definitely someone to watch.
In terms of the teams, when I watch them, I try not to, or I don't even try not to, but occasionally I find a team that I really enjoy watching or really enjoy supporting. It hasn't really happened in Overwatch League. There was a couple of them that I was a little bit interested in, but I didn't really stick to a team. But when I look at Contenders Korea, there is a team that sticks out to me that I'm really bullish on, which is Element Mystic.
I knew you were going to say
I just fucking love these guys. I've been watching them for a long time, back when they were just winning Challenger. And I think at that point, like, we're really starting to get good. And something about their creative style and the weird shit they run sometimes, and the elaborate setups they have for it, like running Tourbillon defense on Gibraltar, and a lot of Orisa defenses on Nepal Sanctum and stuff. They try it on Hanamura, and these kind of weird compositions I really like about Element Mystic. And when I was watching them last season, these motherfuckers broke my heart. I was staying up to watch them it was the quarterfinals, right? And we were here. There's a large TV. I'm in the Owl casting office. There's a large TV on the back there. We pulled up a sofa. We had some drinks. We had some snacks. I was like, okay, this is where they get it started. They're about to take out X6. It's going to be they're about to take out O2 Ardeon and begin on their path towards the finals and claim a victory and look like an incredible talent that should be picked up for Overwatch League. And instead, they utterly shit the bed. They choked so hard, like a really bad choke towards the end.
They did. Like,
this is more than I've ever seen a team choke in Overwatch.
I have never seen a choke this bad before. I mean, Jexay was crying. Everyone was super emotional. I think when you're winning that hard, if suddenly the wind's out of your sails, you're like, well, how do I continue going forward? Especially because I think Element Mystic's was not at the time yet that popular. And I would say still, like, they're not as popular as they deserve to be. So the crowd wasn't necessarily like supporting them in that moment. So it was pretty rough. When between maps you're taking headsets off and talking to the coach and the commentators, like, which you can also hear, when you're in that moment. Like, no one really talks about this, but when you have your headset off between games and you can hear the casters and the Korean casters like, I don't know, are they losing control? Like, what's going on here? And like, you're having to like hear that like in the peripheral while you're talking to your coach and stuff between maps. Like, that can really get into your head. There are a lot of people remember certain moments in Overwatch. Like, I think people remember Fisher's like Earth Shatter on Oasis, where he was able to sneak around. People remember the Eye of the Kaiser moment, and some of the other like huge transcendences we've had throughout the years to save people. Grav bombs with bigger bangs. One of the moments I'll never forget, though, I think one of my most memorable Overwatch moments is I was casting with Achilles, right? We're super hyping this moment on Lijiang, and Guard, he's got his EMP, but the enemy team, I think, is at like 82% or something, and he's the only one alive, and you could just feel the panic on Element Mystic, and they're all just running into the point, like, one by one, and he just, like, runs in by himself, throws the translocator in, and EMPs everybody. He's like the only person alive. He hits like the greatest EMP, but it doesn't matter because he just instantly dies. Like, that level of choke is like beyond even my understanding. Like, probably the best Sombra in Korea at that moment. And he's so freaked out. The team comms are probably all shot to hell. Like no one's really talking. Everyone's freaking out. Like, oh my God, we're gonna lose this series to a team that doesn't even have a positive record. We're undefeated. They don't even have a positive record. They're 2-3. And he throws the translocator in and just EMPs like for no reason. Like that's like a memorable moment for me because this is like the player we heralded as the best sombra for the entire season, and in this moment he just doesn't know what to do. Like there's no communication.
There was a lot of choking going on in that match, and it was very unfortunate to see. I mean, I'm happy for OTR and the run that they were able to make. That was, it was pretty damn impressive. It was looking like maybe they could try to be Royal Roaders, but then they also choked in the grand final and couldn't pick up the win. But yeah, Element Mystic just still have so much promise as an organization, and I think that anyone who is looking to expand their Overwatch League team or is like an investor, like getting a new slot or something like that, they almost certainly have their eyes on Element Mystic, and they're like probably one of the best squads that you could be looking at right now. So we'll have to see how things go moving forward for them, to get into the grand final this season. So far, looks pretty good. They were taken to 5 maps just the other day by GC Busan Wave.
That was
a
great
little
match
bit rougher around the edges, but I mean, both matches that day were just absolutely stellar. But yeah, I mean, these guys are inventive. They're super inventive in an already pretty inventive meta, and it's really good to see that they kind of just go like that extra step beyond, and they have so much brashness with their play, and they're so bold, and they will do things that no other team will think to do, like when they just completely spawn camped Foxes on Nimbani after point A.
Yeah,
like they lose point A. The usual call, like if you're playing in your solo queue or if you're like any other team, the call is, all right, back around the corner, we'll dive them, we'll gain control of the cart, and then we'll hold them on that first corner that you go around as you're pushing the cart. No, they literally sit on the cart in point A and just fucking keep them in the spawn. It's insane.
Yeah.
Nobody else does that.
Yeah.
I think it was them spawn camping before where I started calling it the fucking Willy Wonka style, where no one ever goes in, no one ever comes out, and they pull it off again on Nimbani. It's incredible. Nobody else would go for that other than these guys.
Yeah, they're super. I think they're super full of themselves sometimes. When they're playing against a team like the Foxes, where they're just like, "Oh, I'm better than you. Like, I'm going to make a show of this." I think that's cool because I think that's the kind of team that like makes you want to cheer for them. But it can also be the team that like chokes super hard when you face off a team that's 2-3, you're 5-0, you've dropped no maps pretty much. Like I think it was like 2 maps they dropped the entire regular season.
Yep, 2 maps.
And then you're like, well, I mean, I'm already thinking about who we're facing in the semifinals. I don't know. I mean, I'm really just being facetious right now because I don't actually know what the prep was like going into that. But they went up 2-0 and they got reverse swept. They never dealt with that situation before. But I do think it is cool to have that confidence and that they are very, full of themselves in a lot of ways. That's the impression that I get. Achilles and I have talked to some of these guys, before and after matches, and we're really close to one of their managers. So they're a team of like good kids that want to work together well. It's really unfortunate what happened to Sparkle, which again happened a long time before he even was like a professional player.
And he's only like 15, 16 right now, right?
Yeah, I think he's actually can check his exact age.
16
No.
or 17 maybe.
He was born in May 2002.
What does that mean?
Okay, so 2002. So yeah, he's
okay.
17.
17? Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so Benchmob, the only other Discord message that I had from Benchmob before I set up this podcast was you linking me a spreadsheet filled with all of the Korean Contenders players' dates of birth that you had gone and sourced, which is a great resource for up and coming players because these guys just make everything. But is this a really young team in general? I don't know whether you can remember off the top of your head.
Let's see. Well, Xyz 2001, Sparkles 2002, Guards 98, 2000. Yeah, they're all generally, I'd say, between 18 and 21. It looks like Repel 98, Jexes 99.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see what Element Mystic can do in the playoffs, or if they just choke again. It must be in the back of their head as well that they've set up for another unbeaten season, and the playoffs are coming.
I
think it's a
talked
good
to a lot of
sign.
people about it.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, good.
I was going to say, I
I
think
was
it's a
gonna
good sign what they
okay.
did against.
I can't see your camera, so I don't know when he's
No,
I don't know when
no,
he's
no,
talking.
no.
Go ahead.
I think it's a good sign that they were able to come from behind 2-1 on against GC Busan last week. I think like last season, if you're not faced with adversity at any point in the season, it's probably your team. You were talking about like the ultimate choke job. Like, I don't know if your team necessarily understands how to respond to it when you're actually faced with it on stage and in the playoff scenario like that. I'm not going to say that coming behind and winning 2 straight maps in a 5-map series against GC Busan during the group stages is necessarily like the highest of stakes, but I do think it's a good sign that Busan had all of the momentum seemingly in that series, and Mystic were able to turn it around.
Yeah, I mean that was basically literally what I was going to say. Like, it's such a similar situation. I think in a lot of ways the stakes are not as high, but yeah, like the fact that they were able to do that when the crowd actually was kind of in that moment favoring GC Busan Wave as well. Like everyone likes that team because they're the underdogs. Edison's super popular in Korea right now because fucking good.
He's
And
incredible.
he's a young guy. He's he's one of those players that likes. He strikes me as a player when you look at his face as well as like one of those players that might become someone like Faker, like Flash. Like when I look at his face and like the way he sits in the chair and like just how serious he looks all the time, like he does kind of like give me that impression. I'm not trying to predict that Edison is the newest, greatest.
Clip it.
The
Overwatch
Boncho
player in
chair.
Korea.
Clip it.
But he's insanely talented. Like that's the thing I always say about him. When we had that clip where he killed everybody, like on Ilios, it was like free for him because the enemy had such bad positioning and they're trying to like sneak out of spawn. So it's not like he was winning a widow duel or anything like that. He wasn't like doing anything that incredible. But the fact that he was able to just hit all those headshots when they were popping up, he was playing like the greatest whack-a-mole game of all time and he wouldn't miss. Like he basically just said like, all right, this is my potential given the perfect scenario. Like if my tanks give me room or like they're coming out of spawn and I have full line of sight, I will kill everyone. There's no two ways about it. That's just like he's like the embodiment of pure talent, I think. And it's his first season of Contenders, so who knows like how far he can go.
His
This
DPS
guy's got a
partner
lot of
Alpha
big
Yi
ceiling.
is also incredible though as well. Like
Yeah.
the two of them together are they the best DPS duo that we currently have in Contenders Korea?
You know, there's a good argument for that. I was telling
They
Achilles, it
definitely
reminds
could
me
be
of
pushed up
RunAway a
there.
lot. Because like RunAway
Yeah,
has
they
two
kinda are like
DPS
Huxall
players.
and Stitch.
Yeah, they're kind of like Hoxall and Stitch. Like Edison is Stitch and Alfie is Hoxall. Like he's literally playing the same meta style that like RunAway ran with like the nano blades coming out like when Alfie is playing it. Hoxall also swapped over to Roadhog a lot. Alfie swapping over to Roadhog a lot. Like there's a lot of parallels you can draw.
Yeah.
RunAway didn't have a dominant first season they played in either, and then they came back to form later. But everyone's like, "Oh, this team looks good when they're good." I think there's a lot of parallels you can draw to like early RunAway and GC Busan Wave right now. Are they the best DPS duo? Like, not necessarily. I mean, Hoxall and Stitch also do exist.
Yeah.
when they're
That's
not
true.
subbing Hooreg and summon Suin. I don't know, but
I think Ding and Decay and Ding are also up there in the conversation. Even though Ding is, I don't even know if you classify him as a DPS or a
I mean,
or an off
even
tank.
both of them now. Like we've been seeing. I mean, Decay does play more DPS than tanks.
And
but, like,
Youngjin
even his
too.
Zarya, I think that Decay's Zarya is probably the best one that we have right now in Contenders. So DPS player coming in with that is like excellent. But it's hard to say. I might have to go with Hoxall Stitch at the moment. But there is an argument to be made for Alpha Yi and for Edison right now. Like they are proving themselves, even though like the results for GC Busan Wave aren't, they're not incredible. They're not Element Mystic Season 1-esque, but as a brand new organization full of a bunch of rookie talent who have never played professionally before, like they're the only team, I've said this so many times on broadcast, but I'll say it again. They're the only team in the tournament that could be Royal Roaders. Nobody else qualifies for that. And they're making an argument that they could get to that spot. They're not there yet, but there is a lot of steady upward momentum for these guys. And if they can reach that potential here, like in this final stretch, before we go into playoffs. Who knows? Maybe they can pull it off.
I think they're the only team that's come straight from trials too. Is that right in Korea?
Yeah, I mean,
Like
in
a brand
terms
new
of
team to come in, yeah.
yeah,
Everybody else
exactly.
requalified.
I think there's like a lot of potential in Ivy and Climax again, but like they're super underperforming right now, and maybe they'll pop off in the playoffs again. There's so many good DPS players in Korea, but they have to be like on this. They have to be like good on the day, and I think that like that's something that Edison and Alpha E have shown pretty much every series is like they have not really slumped or underperformed. I know it's like their first series, so saying slumping isn't even necessarily the right word, but I don't feel like there's been a day yet where I was like, well, Edison was great last week, but maybe it was just overhyped. Like I do feel like they have been really consistent.
I'd say there's a moment in their second series. I forget who they're playing against, but
Seven,
it was just one of those.
Yeah,
It's like the bar was set way up here, and then they came in and they ended up losing it, and Edison wasn't nearly as impactful, and that's when I was like, oh, maybe it was just kind of like a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
But now that he's shown us the Doomfist there on Ilios, he comes back in with that pick and suddenly picks up. I think he got like a 4K on his first round back and just had a meteor strike ready to go. Like clearly, like the guy is skilled enough. It wasn't just like, oh, he got lucky that day or was just really feeling it and he hit all those headshots. It was, this guy is mechanically very gifted, and when he gets in the zone, then you really have to fear him and try to deal with him, because otherwise he's just going to destroy your entire team single-handedly.
Yeah, it's a lot of different
I've heard
heroes as
you
well
guys
with different
talk-
skill sets.
Sorry, I think I've heard you guys talk about this too on broadcast too, but I think Edison's still a little. I mean, I've been on Edison for so long now, but I'm also quick to point out that he's a little rough around the edges. Like he's super over aggressive at times, especially on Tracer. Like there's times where he just gets. I feel like I don't know if it's in his head where he feels like he always needs to make the big play, but he'll just get caught out with no cooldowns left. He'll be out of his blinks on Tracer. He'll get into too many flanky positions on Widowmaker and get picked in at really bad times. Like at times when his team has an ultimate advantage and they're up on a control map like 80% to it's basically like last fight or second to last fight, and he just gets picked early on and his team has to almost just throw that fight and plan for one more fight. So I think he's been really rough around the edges. I also think that at times he benefits from some other things that are happening around him, like if his tanks are creating space for him. I don't know if we've seen Edison necessarily pop off yet in this contender season in a situation where, like at times in the past, like people with storied histories like Haxel, for example, like there's times where his team's down, or I know Ding's done it a couple times this year where they're down one or down two players in a team fight and everything's going against them and they just pop off and have like a 3 or 4K individually and single-handedly bring the team back. I feel like a lot of what Edison does is kind of the byproduct of his tanks putting him in a good situation, creating a lot of space, like that one time we saw on Ilios well against MVP Space. I think it was the first match of the year. So I think that's one thing he has to work on, is just a little bit more discipline with positioning, knowing when to be aggressive, when to go in, and coming up with those big hero plays in situations when some of the best DPS players we've seen have done it, like in the face of adversity in the past, not necessarily in situations where it's just optimal for him, where the window's open for him. Because in those situations, he never seems to falter.
Sorry, I thought you were done. And hopefully that's just part of the pod reviews coming through. Like the coach is he's a very energetic guy. Wolf was kind of drawing comparisons over to.
Oh yeah. He is like runner as well. Nick,
is a very bubbly guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he runs into the
very
booth, like fist bumping and stuff. Like there's so many comparisons to draw with this team. Seriously.
Did you see the dance video where he does the Junkrat?
Yes.
Yeah,
I actually did not see that. But
there.
Apparently I have something to do once we're done here. I got to go watch that video. But yeah, I mean he's a very down to earth guy. He's very kind, but he also does come across as very smart, just like talking to him and hearing from him. So I think that that rough around the edges bit, trying to contain Edison a little bit, draw him back so he's less hyper aggressive. I'm sure that's probably all coming through in the coach's feedback, and hopefully it's just like sharpening a blade here with Edison, and like eventually he'll get there. He'll hit that point where he can just like cut through anything. And I think we can kind of already see that from the entire team so far, starting off. Like, I mean, they had a high note because of Edison's play and they won their first match, but then they got shut down a little bit by 7, but now they're like going back up on the up and up, looking like they're going to be in a pretty decent position for in playoffs and whatnot. So yeah, I think it's working well. I think the coach just keeps grinding away at them, and eventually we're going to have this polished gem of a team.
Yeah, I think this if someone's got to keep Edison like on a leash, so to speak. Like, I completely agree with what you were saying earlier about the Ilias Well stuff. Like, with the ability to like perform when his team gives him opportunities to. I think that's like the essence of talent, but also to then like I feel like sometimes get too big headed and try to carry when it's not the time, or try to use your abilities when it's not the time, means that like you could have a big pop off moment, but if you don't, then your team is all just like, oh, okay, well, you died again. I think a lot of people I saw like just around the community compare him to Fleta a lot, because they feel like he's carrying the team in a lot of ways when the rest of the team is weak. But I completely disagree with that sort of like comparison, because I do think that tank line's really good. That's what allows him to do a lot of what he does, especially on Hanzo, for example, where he storm arrows and they win the tank war a lot. And the support line is pretty good as well. So I don't actually think the Fleta comparison that I'm seeing a lot around the internet is like actually warranted, because I do really feel that a lot of what he's able to accomplish thus far is based on.
Having said that, there are definitely teams which, if you put him on, it would be a Fleta-esque comparison. Because there's a lot of teams at the moment in Group A and Group B, the two bottom teams, that really have not been having the best end of it. It seems to be fairly one-sided down at the bottom. There's like, in both of the groups, there's a top 4, but Group B seems to be a little more competitive when you get down to that kind of level. Although not the Foxes, but MVP Space occasionally seems to put up a fight. The Foxes are just getting
I'm so
stomped on.
sorry.
It's honestly like one of the
brutalized.
biggest. It's honestly one of the biggest falls that we've ever seen from a team. Like, WGS started off season 1 of Apex as like the worst team. They got 2 map wins the entire time. Foxes are like already in playoffs in Apex. They're like up there in the standings. They get into playoffs for season 1 of Contenders, and now suddenly they're just 0-12. And it's just what the fuck happened? Like, Sassen has had a couple moments on Pharah so far where like he's looked pretty good, and we're like, oh, that's the Sassen that we remember. Like, he was the one trick Pharah guy who'd get subbed in. He's had a couple moments where that's happened, and everything else is just like, what occurred here? What did we miss?
I mean, they lost Adora. That's what occurred. Like, Adora and Orochi.
I know that's a big thing, but even Sassen's individual play just doesn't look that great. Like, was Adora that important at his side that he can't like mechanically play the game that well anymore?
I don't know. I just think
maybe
like,
that's too mean of me to say, but I'm sad. I'm just, my emotions is spilling through. I don't like seeing the Foxes be the worst team in the league.
But I feel like Adora and Oporochi had like a really special duo with the Genji Mercy, because he was playing the Mercy to pocket the Genji, and that was something that like we've seen in Overwatch League, obviously, but in Korea that wasn't really being done until they did it. And they were able to build really fast blades and like kill Zenyatta's before the Zenyatta had Transcends on first pushes on like Numbani, Hollywood, etc. And they kind of played their whole style around that on Assault and on Hybrid. It's just that dive with Adora. Obviously, you'd occasionally play the Tracer, and he was decent at that. Always moved on to a different team, but yeah, I feel like now that he's gone, like they picked up Just, and he's an ace, and both of those players are just they feel like just generic, like maybe top 500 Korea players. I don't know exactly where they're from. I try to ask and gain information. All I've been able to gather is they were just top players on the ladder,
right.
on Korea. So like totally amateurs, and unfortunately, like if you compare Adora to these amateurs, like it's just there's no comparison. Like they don't have any experience, live, like on LAN. I mean, now they do, but it's not a good experience, unfortunately, not yet.
No, they've just been stopped. They've been turned into fur coats. Which group do you think is more is stronger than the other, Group A or Group B?
That's a really tough question. I want to say Group B is stronger after G Super Wave has looked better, because Metabellum hasn't really been too.
Yeah,
like,
it
I don't
kind of looks like
they've really
right?
popped. Yeah,
which might be part of the
I don't know,
reason
what do you
why
think
Foxes
it
look
is?
like they're being so shit stomped. But
True.
It's really hard, actually, to kind of like say which the toughest group is. I think it's still A. I think that Kongdoo Panthera and RunAway like between with those two and Metabellum, I think that outweighs Element Mystic, O2 Ardent, who are currently top in their group. Like GC Busan Wave, like still need to prove it a little bit more for us that they're going to be like a top contending team.
Sure.
And then Seven has kind of just been like up and down. Like they have a 0 map differential score at the moment, and that just goes to show like, you know, they're not having success in either direction. They're just kind of sitting there in fourth place, like, well, I guess we're going to get playoffs because MVP Space and Foxes are worse than us. Like that's essentially what's happening there. Whereas I feel like there's a lot more shifting that could occur still in like Group A. Like Kongdoo and RunAway, they're locked in the playoffs, but like Metabellum has been looking really good this season so far. Like they've had pretty wild improvements compared to last season. They were already the better sister team to Athena, which got knocked out, then replaced by GC Busan Wave. But I think that, yeah, it's like just 3 really strong teams in A. X6 is like existing at the moment, and then it's just Element Mystic, O2 Ardian over here. So I think that it's still probably Group A for me.
I think if you look at both the groups like on Liquipedia, like I have it open right now, and like if you like draw lines like across like from A to B, like first to first, second to second, and you like go down, you look at the top 4, you look Panthera, Element Mystic, RunAway, and O2 Ardent, and you look at all 4 of those teams and you go, okay, all 4 of these teams are fucking really amazing right now. But then when you go below, I feel like that's when you start to see like the real differences. Like in Group A, Metabellum, X6, I feel like personally, I don't 100% agree with what you said about Metabellum. I feel like they started off the season well, but I think they're kind of trending downward. X6 is massively trending downward. Like what happened after BQB's gone? Like what is this team? And then you look at GC Busan Wave, looking up and up. Seven's had some really good matches. And then when you go down to the bottom tier as well, like Blossom, 04, WGS, like, you know, they looked a little bit better, but like overall, And then you look at MVP Space and like they haven't had a great season. Like this has been one of their best seasons in a while. Sure, they're still 0-3, but they've taken the most maps.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the first time I look at MVP Space in a while and I go, wow, this is like a really good team. It's unfortunate that they're in such a tough group, but like they actually look really good. And then there's the Foxes, which like is further proof that like the 5 teams above are so good because they're just getting battered like super hard. I mean, I do think they're much worse than they were last season, but I think that furthers the point. Like, I think Group A is kind of like top heavy. Like Panthera and RunAway are by far and above the best teams. Or if you look at B, it's like Element Mystic and O2 Ardian are just slightly better than GC Busan Wave and Seven. It feels like to me. On paper, Group A was definitely like the group of death. But actually, now that we've seen the groups play out, I think B was like the more competitive group overall.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
When all of the Group A teams progress through the playoffs.
When Element Mystic choke again.
I hope not, man.
And GC Busan.
I'd be fine with them making it. You know, that's okay. I'm all right with Element Mystic makes it to the grand final.
The one team that we haven't really talked about much, but it's the team at the top of Group A, is Kongdoo Panthera. But we've talked about Ding and Decay, and actually, I want to start by asking what Decay's age is. Benchmob owner of the tome of birth dates. I think Decay becomes eligible this year, right, for Overwatch League.
So he's February 27th, 2001. So he'll actually become eligible like a month into season 2 of Overwatch
So
League.
in February, right, he would be eligible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this guy's been a real talent, and I was kind of waiting for him to become 18. It's always a weird thing to say. But it's always weird. It's always weird. But yeah, Decay has been fantastic for quite a while. Was playing Tracer back in the Tracer meta and was really good. Can play a huge range of hit scan heroes, and I think the DPS lineup is something that we talked about a little bit for Kongdoo Panthera, but they've been performing really well, and they've had their ups and downs as well. Actually, after they lost Kongdoo Panthera over to Cloud9, what then became the London Spitfire, they had a weird rebuilding process where things didn't look that great for a while for this team, and now they're back on top.
Yeah, well, I think it was a lot of it was just because like, and I still feel that this is a big weakness for the team. A lot of the players don't have like a set position or a set role. Like Youngjin is DPS, but he kind of plays everything. Same with Ding, who's like terrifying when he's given projectile, but also he plays like sometimes the Diva, for example. And then Decay is like known for his Zarya play, but he is also like somewhat known for his Tracer play and his Diva play that he, you know, played back in like the Team Story Cup. which is like an online Chinese tournament that happened. That was like the most data we had to go on for the new Panthera roster before season 1. But like the thing that was always true of Panthera with this roster is they were good with like quad tank, always. And they played mostly Lijiang Tower in that tournament, so they looked really dominant. Decay looked really strong. Everyone in Korea was saying Kongdoo Panthera is by far the strongest team before season 1. Not a single person would have told you that like Panthera was not the strongest team, and everyone said Decay was the best player and Kongdoo Panthera is the best team. Like literally, it was universally agreed upon by every Korean that was the case. In all the pre-interviews we had with all the players, because we get these like questionnaire sheets from them where they kind of give us some of their info. It was like, who's the strongest player? Who do you think has the best chance of going to Overwatch League? Like almost across the board, everyone said Decay. Everyone said Kongdoo Panthera is the strongest team.
Yeah.
So like Achilles and I were really hyped, right? Okay, like this team's got a long history in Apex, new roster, but they look strong. And then we go into season 1, it's like, what the hell? Like I feel debated. Like, you know, I watched the teams for a couple. They did good there. They were just horrible, and we were like, okay. But now we go back to the tank meta again. They look good there. Decay has kind of honed his Genji a little bit, his Widow. Like, I think Decay is such an interesting case for me because I feel like he's very inconsistent. Like, I think when he is good, like, you're like, holy shit, did you see what he did with Tracer just now? He killed 3 people without using a recall, or, you know, he's got these incredible headshots on the Widow, or look at that Dragon Blade. But other times you're like, he's not even, the observers aren't even watching him because you just never know like what mistake he might make, or, you know, whether he's going to blink off the side. Like that's happened before, you know. I mean, the guy he's really good on his best, but in my opinion, like, even though maybe at his best he's better than other DPSs in the league, I can't rate him as high as I think a lot of other people do because of his inconsistencies. And like, even though he's got a large hero pool, I feel like they're not as good as like other flex heroes. Like, I can never say his Widow is as good as XC's Widow. Like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to say that because he plays too many heroes. And
yeah,
Kongdoo Panthera has too many swaps for players. Like, they kind of just go like, all right, well, you can play this and I can play that, and like we're gonna kind of throw this comp together and let's go. Like, it feels
they're
like
overly flexible. It's like if someone tried to
Yeah.
enter a gymnastics competition and remove their bones because they thought that would make it better. But you lose all of the stability. You can't do anything. You're flopping all over the place.
Yeah,
floppy
that's a good way to put it.
Now I want a gymnastics like quap game.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be an interesting one. You have to like swing around the bars and do like a loop. Oh man.
Yeah.
But
I just want to put Ding's face
Yeah.
on the character, you know, and Youngjin as
Exactly.
well. They're the 2 playable characters.
I don't know. I mean, they look really good. Like, this is like their meta. That's what we've been talking about. Is like, if this meta is so fucking good for them, but if it changes, everything could come crashing down if they can't adapt. Like, that's the big thing here with Kongdoo Panthera. It's like a pendulum swing, and the patch change could be the pendulum swinging back into the negatives for them, and
Sure.
maybe that costs them a lot down the line. You know, still.
Was that a
working out
Wrecking
things
Ball
like-
reference or?
No, not yet. We'll see. Not quite yet, but that casting, that's gonna be interesting whenever that happens. But yeah, I mean, we don't know what the meta is going to look like moving forward, future patches, even in season 3. So like, even if Kongdoo like happen to go into the grand final, maybe take it away, they might just come back into season 3 if the meta is completely different. They can't run their style anymore, and they can't adapt. Like, maybe they just end up bottoming out. You know, I think that they'd still probably make playoffs because there is a lot of natural talent there. So I'm not saying I think that they're going to go into trials and all this stuff, but
Sure.
you know, they could fall off very quickly, and that's the dangerous thing about this roster.
Yeah, I think.
Go on.
Just like to talk on that note for a second, like they could win this tournament and be totally terrible next season, but that's like what's really impressive to me about Element Mystic, right? For example, they lost their Genji player, right, and their Junkrat player in a meta where we still need those heroes a lot, and they're able to. It took them a while get back to form. Whereas like X6, for example, they lost BQB and they look lost, like completely lost without the Sombra meta. And like, I think I just want to say this really quick before we change topics, because I feel like Element Mystic was the best team of season 1. Can we all agree like that was the case? Like that
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are like, no, well, if they were the best team, they would have won. I'm like, okay, but they didn't win the tournament. I'm not saying they were champions, but like, can we all? I think we can all agree like Element Mystic was the best team in season 1. Now they're showing further their flexibility. Like, did X6 deserve the title? I don't know.
I mean,
wanted to talk to you guys
also
about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one as well because part of playing in a tournament like this is being able to cope in high pressure situations and actually be able to
Sure.
perform to your potential when it's required. I think this is the same.
NYXL.
Yeah, this is exactly the same thing for NYXL. NYXL are the best team of the Overwatch League Season 1. Like, there's no denying that. But whatever team wins the final will have won the final and will have been the best
Yeah.
during the playoffs. And so I
Yeah.
think when it's a weird situation when you have stuff like that because you essentially have two best teams and you have to always put in like a caveat of okay, but this absolute phenom of a team choked. But then I don't even think. I mean, it's slightly different in that case because I don't think NYXL really choked. But that's a topic for an Overwatch League podcast, perhaps. But Element Mystic, it was fairly clear cut that these guys had all of this great talent, but they just shit the bed due to the pressure. So, and if it had just been a regular season game or something like that, where there wasn't as much pressure on the line, I think they probably would have been perfectly fine there. So I feel perfectly fine saying that they were the best team of season 1.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I agree, and I think that that's going to be like the big proving point now is coming into season 2. If they get put into another situation like that, can they actually excel? You know,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
already talked about they were able to come out ahead of their match just the other day. When it went all the way to game 5, they were able to persevere, get the win. So it's a really good sign of progress in staying level-headed in those high pressure situations. But actually making the push this time and getting to that final is going to be the proving point. Because I mean, you think back of a lot of the greatest players, the greatest teams that have been through esports, like everybody kind of had this moment where like they start off like looking really good, and then there's a dip, and then like domination just kind of comes afterward. Like SK Telecom T1 and League of Legends is a one that comes to mind. They win the world championship, like one of the first world championships that like actually mattered. Like season 2 was pretty good. Like season 3 was like really hype as fuck. It's the Staples Center. It was like, wow, like esports is really growing. There's like a huge moment, and SKT comes out and wins. But then immediately the next season, like they don't even qualify for Worlds. They get knocked out of it.
Yeah.
And then they come back from that, having learned from that experience, and they win, the next few championships, world championships, like just in a row. Taking away 2015, 2016, and then just losing in 2017.
Yeah, you have to
bounce back.
You have to experience like the greatest winning moments, but also like you have to experience adversity to become like a really strong, well-rounded team. Then yeah, like perhaps like the discussion of NYXL is like better for another place, but yeah, I think like a lot of teams experience this where it's just utter domination, and then something changes, like you're losing a series or the meta changes and you can't grasp it, and then like it's a true show of character, like how you deal with those moments. Like how does your coach get you through that? How do you kind of walk away from adversity, like with like your head held high or like your head held low, and like what do you do to like overcome those challenges? I think a lot of people like across the board in Overwatch and in other esports, like when a new patch comes out, a new meta comes out, they just tweet like, can't play my hero anymore, like fucking Blizzard, I knew it. And I knew it was coming. I saw the PTR notes and look at the meta, like the game is ruined. We're a dead game now. And then other players will just like fucking learn the new hero, play the meta, and win, and don't complain. Like I think that like that's like what shows true character in a player. And I think El Mystic has a squad of people that are like that. So I think they're gonna do well. I don't know if they're gonna choke again. They might. That would be a tragedy. But I think if they lose, it's because they're gonna get outplayed straight up. Like that would be how they lose. I don't think they will choke again.
The next topic I wanted to talk about was an interesting thing that me and Yiska had a debate about when I think when Overwatch League was just about to begin, which was that he thought Korea and the Korean contender scene would be hurt pretty heavily, at least in the first season or first couple of seasons of Contenders, by so many of the elite teams and players. So it's not just the 3 full Korean teams, or 4 if you want to say that kind of London Spitfire took 2 of them, but also a lot of other teams took wedges of Korean Apex talent and stole them away to LA to play over there. And the coaching staff as well. There was a huge chunk of the Korean scene that has now formed the Overwatch League scene. And yet it doesn't seem to have made that much difference to the rate of talent improvement, talent acquisition, young players coming through, the skill level overall. Is this just something that I can't really detect from the outside, or has it not happened at all? Has the classic Korean esports machine continued turning without a hitch?
I think the best example of that is like X6, because they lost Choi Hyun-bin, and I think he was like probably the most pivotal player on that roster. And then they lost Architect as well, obviously, but like losing both of those players at the same time, basically. They did play, like now we have different rules for like how that stuff works with I forgot what Blizzard called it exactly, but like 2-time players or something. I don't know where you can play in
the
Overwatch, but
two-way
you can play in
players.
Contenders.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2-way players. But like there was no real rules about that. So like Architect and Choibin played for a little bit, and then they got their visas and they left. And it was funny because after they left, the team got like even stronger and they did better last season when they were more reliant on BQB, for example, and Godsby rather than Architect. So I think like it depends on the motivation of the team and like where the team's kind of mentality's at. Because if you're a team that's like middling, like say for example you're GC Busan Wave, and you're starting to get some momentum, and you're feeling really good about like where your team is headed, and then suddenly like Alpha gets yanked away, and you're like, oh, you know, like in the middle of a season. I think like that sort of thing, like I thought it was really going to crush X6, and also when Aim God was taken like later on as well, for Metabellum, I thought these things were going to be like huge crushing factors, but I think the team kind of knew about it from a long time, and they just were like ready to let him go. Like all these players were ready to let their players, or all these teams were ready to let their players go and kind of continue to improve. I think the biggest thing that I personally feel like we lost was when we lost Lunatic High. Like that was by far the biggest fan base. Like I know you guys probably watching, like, you know, those watching at home and stuff, like who didn't watch all of Apex, but maybe like saw the highlights, saw the finals.
It must be RunAway.
RunAway, literally, with the finals, Lunatic High versus RunAway. Achilles and I were there. We weren't casting back then. Well, we had done promotions, but we literally sat in the center of the venue, massive venue. I mean, huge. And like I'd say probably, I think conservatively, like 75% of the people in the audience were Lunatic High fans.
Wow.
And like that's versus RunAway, right? Like all the fan cheers were loud, but like when Lunatic High fans were cheering, like you wished you had ear protection because they were so fanatical about this team. And like RunAway is the biggest fan base now, but like just put in perspective that we had a fan base that was basically 4 times bigger, like 4 times bigger,
than the
or
biggest.
maybe 3 times bigger, I guess, to continue to like use the math correctly for that analogy. In Lunatic High, and we lost that, and like most of those fans like dissipated and went into like PUBG, for example, where they followed Eska and his journey down that way, and Taejun as well. But like that's the thing I think we lost the most when we lost Seoul Dynasty, is those fans still like watched Overwatch League, but those same fans were really upset that Seoul Dynasty underperformed so hard as well. So like all those fans are kind of just like, like I don't know what happened. I guess I lost my team.
It's also mad though that the game that you're talking about, where you sat in the crowd, just to clarify, that's the Overwatch, that's the Apex Season 2 finals, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The RunAway versus.
At that point, it wasn't the Lunatic High were the best team in the world or had won like a championship or something. They hadn't won anything at that point. The Apex Season 1 was won by Envious. They had, you know, they had done pretty well, but they hadn't made the finals.
They didn't even make the finals.
They got knocked out in the quarters by Kongdoo Panthera. It was a very close game. It was a very good game, but what had driven the fan base to be 3 times larger than everybody else's?
Yeah, it's crazy because like they had, I mean, they have lovable players. They have players that are like mostly streamers. And this is something that like, people don't talk about with Overwatch a lot, but like because we don't have Kespa in the scene and like tons and tons and tons of money like for players that are like getting salaries, for example, in Korea. Like as most pro gamers that are like popular, like Hoxall, for example, were actually streamers / pro gamers. Like Order, for example, you guys probably know from Contenders as well. Ans, and then like basically all the players on Lunatic High like streamed, you know, to some extent.
Right.
And so like they were popular from that. They're like lovable faces, etc. And so I think that's part of the reason why they became so well liked. They had the jersey and stuff. They played in APAC as well, and they played in, I think the timeline for that was like APAC was before Season 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
and
APAC was actually before Season 1.
APAC the one where they played against Rogue in the finals, that was before Season 1.
Yeah, that was before.
I'm getting my timelines mixed up.
Because they delayed the group games of Apex Season 1 in order for Rogue and Lunatic High to complete APAC.
So they played that, and they also played IEM Gyeonggi as well. And but by IEM Gyeonggi, they already had so many fans, it was insane. Like I cannot even, like the only people that came to watch yeah,
The audience
was-
for Overwatch at that point was pretty much empty unless Lunatic High was playing. Every
Yeah.
time that they weren't playing, there was like 20 people in the audience. Every time that they stepped up to play, it was packed to the brim. People standing room and all that kind of stuff. Like they were just pushing into that section of the IEM as much as they possibly could to watch Lunatic High. And they didn't even win it. It was LW Purple,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think, as we were calling it
Yeah.
at the time. Ended up coming up with that win. But yeah, like it's insane to see, to like kind of look back and remember how big that fan base actually was for, as you said, like a team that hadn't yet accomplished anything. Like season 2 was really crazy, and it's not
Yeah.
something I thought about at the time when Wolf and I were like sitting in the arena. I never had the thought of like, these guys haven't done anything yet. Why are they all, where's all these fans? I was just like, oh my god, there's so many people. This is
Yeah.
amazing.
We just knew they had so many fans for the whole season, and they had fans for season 1, and they had fans for Gungi. So like, I just like, it was like, well, yeah, there's going to be a million fans there. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't really about like what they accomplished or not when we were looking at it. It was just like, well, there's like a ton of people that love and adore this team, and in Korea, like, there's a certain level of like idol culture for pro gamers across like all esports, including like StarCraft. You know, from the Brewbor days to now, even like some
Yeah, yeah.
StarCraft 2 players. So yeah, I think it's just kind of like, these guys have got pretty faces. They're really good at the game. They've got good personalities. They're really well spoken, and their fan base just, we lost, like, it feels like we lost all of that in just like one fell swoop. And I think that, to me, like, that's the biggest thing I feel since Overwatch League started, is like we lost all those Lunatic High fans, because they would also come to other matches as well. Like, they
Yeah,
were
yeah.
hardcore Lunatic High fans, but they would stay for the whole matches for like the other groups that happened, you know, on the same day as their match. So
One of
in terms
the
of like coaching and stuff, I mean, it doesn't feel like we lost that much.
Yeah, in
There's
terms
a
of
question.
coaching and players, it really doesn't feel like much has disappeared at all, though, in the Korean scene. Because as you were saying
Yeah.
before, 1,000 teams signed up to play in the open division to try and get into trials, to try and get into contenders. That dwarfs the amount that signed up for North America and Europe, as far as I remember. I think it was that if you added North America and Europe together, you got somewhere around that number, like somewhere around 900. I can't quite remember. I think it was like 300 for Europe and 650 or something for NA. Numbers might be a little bit off. But Korea, do you think that it will still remain the largest talent pool in terms of up and coming players into the Overwatch League? Is it still going to be able to retain that kind of prestige?
I think so. I think as long as
Yeah.
as long as it stays popular, like, I personally feel like Battlegrounds, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, is somewhat on the decline in Korea. And during like the lull between, like, no one knew if Apex was going to continue, and like Overwatch League news was like pretty sparse in Korea, and everyone, the only things we like really knew, like around the era where we only knew like, okay, like Lunatic High is Seoul Dynasty, like around that time, like when that announcement was happening, there was not a lot going on. Like Apex was finishing up, and then we weren't sure what was going to happen to Apex. Like, I think in that era, a lot of people went to Battlegrounds because they were like, well, I love Overwatch because of esports, and like I want to play this game, but like it's kind of getting old to me, and I'm gonna try this Battlegrounds game out. But like Battlegrounds is super on decline, in my opinion. You know, in Korea right now, it's not just the PC bung numbers, but I think like it's declining. Viewership is not very good. So I think a lot of people are coming back to Overwatch because the scene is still like thriving. The storylines are still
Yeah,
really
yeah.
cool. And I think if that continues and people still really love to play the game, then I think that we will always have like a really big talent base here. As long as the format for the tournament doesn't change, as long as we have like an offline venue where the teams play in front of live audiences and they're on TV and the game is popular, like if those three things are true, there's always going to be tons of people who want to play the game here in Korea.
Yeah. If you got those, then people are just gonna be like, well, whatever, fuck it, on to the next game.
Yeah.
Fortnite, yeah, and then
But it feels like a viable career path, I think, for a player. You know, if you're looking at like, I could be on TV, I see these big fan bases. You know, Overwatch League is like a viable career option for like real pay. You know, you like read about the salaries and stuff that you hear people are having, or you talk to people. You know, if you're a top player, you're probably talking to like contenders
Yeah.
teams. You're like, well, this is like a real career option for me. Then like I think you're gonna work really hard for it if you're that good at it. And I think it's really exciting for Korea because Korea has never been known for FPS success. And I know that Overwatch is kind of a unique FPS. It's not like Counter-Strike FPS. But I really think that like for a lot of people in Korea, like, this is my time. Like, this is a game that we're good at in Korea. I love FPS. I never got to try to compete on a Korean team because there weren't any good Korean teams. But like,
Sure.
I'm an FPS player. I want to make my career out of this. So I think a lot of people are excited about it.
Talking about players who would potentially try and make their way into the Overwatch and stuff like that, do you have your eye on any people, or have you already identified people that you think you would be able to plug straight into Owl already, or who perhaps better than their Owl counterparts that are there?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's like a list that you could give. I think, like, depending on like what roles you wanted to talk about, like there are players that I think are inherently better than some of the people who are in Owl or just at Owl level right now, and like just could go on and like maybe sub in and out with other people. But I don't know if I want to publicize that list.
Okay.
'Cause I like our players in Korea, and if they get picked up, if they get picked up as like a full roster, then that's great. But I don't like
You don't want to
seeing
get them poached.
a team that does really well like get cherry picked. Like if RunAway got broken up and like somebody grabbed Bumper, I'd be fucking heartbroken. Like, or they took Stitch and they didn't take Hawksall. Like
Yep.
that's like splitting up like the two puppies that are like twins at the shelter, and you just like take the boy puppy and leave the girl one there. Like you can't do that. Take them both and don't take anything. Like get the whole organization, or just go look somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean,
Fiercely defensive.
I'm not in America
If
right
you want to
now.
get these fucking players.
I'm not in America right now, and I don't have like the opportunity or the luxury to like visit team houses and kind of get like an idea of the atmosphere in the houses, because I think that there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get shared to the public about like team synergy and who's doing well and what. So like if I had that information, then it'd be easier for me to like plug and play some of these players into certain rosters, because I feel like a lot of the issues in Overwatch League rosters right now is based on like team synergy and personalities clashing. And then like that's like one of the big things that prevents a team from working together and improving better. There's other things like meta and, is the coaching staff doing the proper things. I don't want to talk about Shanghai right now, but we can go on that tangent some other time. But yeah, like for example, sure, like maybe you could just have Stitch plugged into like almost any team. You could put Stitch in for Sabiel because Sabiel's Widow is clearly like not up to par right now, and I could say that, but like would Stitch work well with New York Excelsior? I don't know. Like pretty much any player that like makes my list for the top 6 I post every week, like I feel like is basically Overwatch League worthy. Like not necessarily like every time, but like most of the time. But yeah, I don't where they go specifically. Like if I could like stick them into a team, I think I need to know more about like what's going on within the teams. And you probably know more of that because you're actually there like on the ground. Whereas for me, I can just talk to people sort of and like speculate based on things that I've seen.
Yeah.
We get the Twitter bants. That's how we figure out how things are going.
Yeah.
I see Fisher like arguing with people on the internet like over and over again. I'm like, I wonder what's going on. What's going on over there? That's all.
Well, he was just outraged by story there.
Sorry, say that again.
I just said he was just he just rated below Remix and Scrims. That's all it was. There was really no story there.
Yeah, no story. No story.
Next.
Yep, next. Something that's really interesting though, when you think about like plugging and playing a lot of these Korean players, is that unless you want to completely change the communication structure of about half of the teams in the league, you would have to find Korean players that speak reasonable English to be able to communicate it. Are there players that speak really good English that you've been able to identify, or is it still a lot of the case where you'd have to kind of change out the other half of a lot of these rosters?
Yeah, the best one, who's the best English-speaking player that we had, was in season 1, and he doesn't play anymore, and it was insane, actually.
Yeah, Insane from Blossom was like really good English.
English. Like it was the Philippines, I think he lived in for a while or something like that.
He was living in like Malaysia or the Philippines or something like that, I think.
Yeah, so he was living outside Korea and learned English at the time, and actually spoke really, really good English. So he was definitely the best I think that we've had so far in Contenders. We talk to most of the players when we see them, but we never really get to have like that much of a conversation. We usually just see the teams, and we're just like, oh, hello, and they say hello back, and we're just like, oh, good luck fighting, and they're just like, oh, thank you, and they leave. So we don't have that many opportunities to sit in depth with them. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
so
trying to
it's
think.
hard to say. I can't really think of anyone because obviously Runner doesn't count, but his English is good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Runner's English is really good.
I think a lot of the coaching staffs actually have at least one member who seems to be pretty good at English. I mean, just in terms of communicating with them through Discord or Twitter or whatnot, trying to get in touch with the players. Like a lot of the
Mhm.
communication I have with them, of course, has to go through like a translator. But in terms of me reaching out to them, whether it's a team manager, usually just at least one individual on the coaching staff, someone seems to be very, very fluent in English.
Yeah, a
Yeah,
lot of
usually
them,
the teams will
they're
have someone
realizing
that work.
they're realizing how important that is, especially because the whole idea, I guess, behind this is like, well, let's be as successful as possible here, and then maybe one day we have we'll get reached out to by somebody who's in the Overwatch League, and then we can move
Sure.
over there. So we need to be able to speak English if a foreign investor wants to reach out to us. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people going for that. There's a lot of Korean English speakers that are in managerial positions. We have Wolf kind of mentioned it earlier. Our friend Emily is the manager for Element Mystic. I think she and Susie actually used to be roommates. So she's managing
Okay.
Element Mystic, and now Susie's managing London Spitfire. Maybe that's a secret. You just
Okay.
have to be roommates with Susie, and then you become a great manager.
Or is
But
that the
yeah,
next
Emily
team?
also
Goes to
is.
the finals? Oh, not the case for Element.
That's the next team
you
that
know-
the London Spitfire are going to pick up. If they
Yeah.
end up losing to the
Exactly.
Philadelphia Fusion, they just buy
Jack's
Element
watching
Mystic.
this and he's just like, all right, I see my next snag.
Yep.
Get them all.
That's why they cut the other half of their team. They need to open up
Yep.
6 slots so that they can
Exactly.
prepare for Overwatch
But
League
I
Season
guess
2.
I guess to go back to your initial question though, like I think it's probably going to be mostly like basic English, is like the maximum
Yeah.
for most of our players. Like I can speak Korean, and I usually when I interact with the players speak Korean with them, but some of them will like try to speak English to us. I can't think of anyone who like really excelled outside of insane, but it's like passable English. You could tell people
Sure.
your ult percentage. You can tell people like enemy ult cooldowns and stuff like that, or you can say like above, below, behind, like things like that. Like, I think pretty much every player in Contenders can like speak enough basic English to communicate with an Overwatch League team in English. But yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head any of the remaining players that like really speak English well. Like Kaiser is really good at English, for example, and like he's in Korea right now. We see him a lot. We talk to him a lot, but he's not a Korea Contenders player at the moment, so
Sure.
I guess he doesn't really count.
Yeah, it's kind of just like these guys from the past, like that aren't just playing the game right now. Were the ones that were really good at English.
Yeah.
Like Bishop, yeah.
Bishop
was someone that we had that was really good at English.
Jesus, Bishop's English is incredible.
It's better than mine.
I know. Like I speak to Bishop, and I'm just like, oh god, like, am I speaking properly? Like this guy is.
Yeah.
Sounds like he's got a master's degree in English.
So the final topic that I want to talk about is the matches that people should tune in for the next couple of weeks. Like you guys are gearing up for playoffs at the moment. We're in kind of the latter stages of the regular season. What are some big either blockbuster matches or ones that have really pivotal importance in where someone places, or is it all about the playoffs at this point? I mean, looking at the games that are coming up, the O2 Ardeon against GC Busan Wave could be a pretty fun
That's
one.
the big one, yeah. I think otherwise, like you really just need to, if you want to see, like if you're a RunAway fan, RunAway versus Metabellum should be a good series. And if Kongdoo Panthera is upset by X6, I think we definitely call it an upset at this point. If X6 beats Kongdoo Panthera and RunAway beats Metabellum, then they take the first place spot. So those are kind of like the big important ones. Otherwise, like it's kind of a week of mediocre matches overall. Like MVP Space versus Foxes will be kind of interesting just because they're both at the bottom of the spectrum, but I think MVP Space will probably still dominate. Like this is kind of like, to me, it feels like the week that just kind of closes the door on like regular season. But the playoff matches, like those are the ones that people really need to watch. There's a lot of really cool potential good matches there. Like 7 versus Kongdoo is like maybe one that we're going to start with, and then like X6 versus Element Mystic, like the defending champions against someone who could have been the champion, like what could have been the season 1 finals. So there's some cool matchups coming up for playoffs for sure. As long as no big changes happen.
I mean, if it stays the same way it is now as well, that would be GC Busan Wave going up against RunAway, right? The 3 versus 2, the kind of mirror matchup of RunAway against their past selves in a different universe. You're saying you
Yeah,
should
it feels
draw
that way,
somebody
right? Yeah,
Get to see
that's.
Stitch versus Edison.
Yes, yeah.
Oh no, it's probably gonna be Hooreg though. Like, so.
RunAway doesn't want to go to the grand final.
They've got to make
Oh,
it to the
God,
grand
I
finals.
loved
and then
Hooreg.
lose.
I loved Hooreg back in the day. Like, I was a big Hooreg fan. I sang his praises. So like, it feels so bad when we have to talk about him like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to bash Hooreg in particular. Like I said, I think that he could work on the roster if they just had him swapped in over Hoxall instead. I think that that would be a better idea. Like, I know that he's got the potential. I know that he can be good. I'm more just confused about the decision making from RunAway to continually try this thing that has not delivered results.
And what
'Cause I
heroes
know
he's
some
playing and
people-
stuff.
Some people are like messaging me on the competitive Overwatch subreddit, and they're like, "Stop harassing Hooreg." I'm like, I'm not harassing Hooreg. I'm ridiculing the decision to play him. Like,
It's also a little bit
You know.
surprising given that every time I open that subreddit when a RunAway match is happening, like the entire post-game thread or the entire like game thread is just like, "Oh, Hooreg, oh my god, no, like I hate RunAway for this." I'm surprised that
Yeah.
those same people would harass you about your commentary of him, but
It's a
You can
very
harass
me
it's
what are you
niche
gonna do,
Hooreg
you know?
supporters club that are harassing.
what's so
killing
weird
us.
I mean,
about-
I'm the club manager, but I hide in the shadows right now, you know.
I think what's so weird about the Hooreg thing is that, like, not to bring it back to Overwatch League, but one of the things that we saw is there were a lot of times questions about coaches swapping in player for player when it was clear that one player excelled on a hero. But a lot of times you hear, like, just one example that comes to mind is like with the Dallas Fuel, they'd occasionally swap Taimu and AKM around on Widowmaker, and it had to do with their play styles. And the coach actually explained very well what it is about the play styles that likens one to be better on certain maps and such. And what's so weird about the whole Hooreg thing is there's no, in my opinion, no discernible reason, like in terms of play style, why you would want him number one swapped in for either Stitch or Hoxall, but especially the one that you're choosing to swap them in for really makes no sense in terms of Hoxall's hero pool and why the two of them are then playing together.
Yeah, for me, like Hooreg, the thing he was most known for was just his positioning, whether it was on the Soldier, the Pharah, the McCree. I would say maybe not so much Doomfist, but for his other parts of his hero pool, like he would oftentimes just sneak around and then pull out a Deadeye or a Tac Visor, and like no one knew where the hell he was. And then it was like, oh my god, Soldier's over there, like he's like outside of our spawn. How did he get there? And he's killing everyone. He was just really good positionally, and his accuracy on the Pharah I think was really phenomenal. But like on the Widow, I don't see it. Like we've seen a lot of cool Widow flanks, especially from Edison, from Happy as well. And with Hooreg, it's just like he's just trying to play standard and he's getting bopped. And like his first person view is almost never shown by the observers because I think the further don't want to embarrass him. But when it is, like we have seen a few moments where it's like, whoa, like, RunAway fans are getting stressed out right now.
Yeah, I think they learned that like, because when someone's playing Widowmaker and they're not like one of the most focused on people, you know that there's
Yeah,
problem.
there's
Like,
something going wrong there.
I don't know if we ever saw his first person view on Dorado outside of like he tried to get an opening shot jumping up over the top looking down into point A, and then I don't know if we ever saw it
taken
again.
away because he died. Like
Yeah.
you swiftly saw like a third person view of his body on the ground.
Yeah.
Going back to your question though, we'll stop messing with Hooreg and RunAway, mostly on RunAway.
Hooreg.
But yeah, this is kind of like the much more laid back week. We kind of know like we know what, like which teams are going to be in the playoffs. It's mostly about deciding the final positions of those squads unless some major upsets happen, but it seems unlikely. So I think this is mostly going to be a week that people should watch just to see what the standings are, figure out what the playoff matches are going to be as we get ready to go into that, and also just enjoy some fucking Korean Overwatch, man. Like
Yeah, I mean,
it's always hype. Like
it is.
If you had to pick two matches, like I'd say the 26, like X6 Kongdoo Panthera, that matters a lot for first place seed, and like maybe
that's
X6
actually,
bounces back.
The 26 is actually quite a good day.
And then you have Ardiant versus GC Busan Wave, which is amazing and could also determine GC Busan Wave seeding. And then on the 29th, you have RunAway versus Metabellum, which again is a pretty decent matchup just on paper. And that RunAway has to win and Panthera has to lose, of course, for them to take first place. And then actually Elo Mystic versus MVP Space. I know on paper it sounds like, okay, one-sided, boring, but I think that matchup could be pretty interesting. I think it's kind of like a final test for Elo Mystic going into playoffs. Like, can you 4-0 this team? Are you going to have problems? You know, MVP Space looks to be the best they've ever been, in my opinion, this season, even though they're still winless. Like, I think they've improved a lot. So that's one that I'm looking forward to personally. So I think those 2 days, the 26th and the 29th, are the ones to watch.
25th, 28th is basically about seeing, like, can WGS get more than 2 map wins this season? Beat the record? And can the Foxes get any map wins at all here in season 2? That's basically what's on the line for those guys.
I would also encourage anybody that hasn't watched any so far to go back and watch the July 21st games? I think basically the Kongdoo Panthera against RunAway and then GC Sunwave against
22nd.
22nd. Okay, yeah, different time zones for us, but yeah, 22nd.
Yep.
Because that was fantastic and kind of sets the scene a little bit for what we've been talking about and what you'll see for the rest of it. And then the playoffs are going to be dumb hype. Actually, I'm really looking forward to those.
Yeah,
Again, the Contenders
they
Korea
are
playoffs
gonna
are going to
be
be fantastic. So
better than last
we
season,
already had,
for sure.
Yeah, we already had, you know, like the season 1 playoffs were just incredible. What with, you know, the reverse sweep, as heartbreaking as it was for Element Mystic, like the O2 Ardent run was like just so astounding to see. And now it feels like we might not have room for that sort of thing to happen again, like those major upsets, but it seems like the games are going to be still a bit more tight knit, and that the level of play is just higher at this point. So I think it's going to be some pretty gritty, just nonstop, you know, battles coming through. Hopefully we, you know, get some good maps coming in. Rialto, have we seen Point C on Rialto yet? I think we saw it maybe once.
Yeah, we did see it once. I forgot who it was. I think it was early on in the first week.
Yeah, I think it was maybe like the first.
It was
time
Kongdoo because I remember. It was definitely Kongdoo because I remember Ding.
Yeah,
because then they full held them on point A because
that's right.
Ding
You're
was
right.
just popping
Against
off on
Bellum.
Farah.
Yeah. Against.
So like,
that.
If that's the way that Rialto's going to be, I kind of want to avoid that. I want some more like, let's get at least close to point C. Like maybe you hold them just shy of the finish, but I want to see some longer stretches on, you know, hybrid and escort and stuff like that. 2CP is already ridiculous, so we don't need any changes to that. We get the snowballs coming through, but those other ones, I
how many overtime rounds can we get? Or can we get like an 8-8 fucking 2CP? Like go there.
Yeah, we did have our first draw. I don't think that had happened before, so we did have our first draw. But
and when are the playoffs beginning? If people are gonna schedule for when the playoffs are happening, and we should look back in after that as well. When
look that date up really quick. It starts on August 1st, and there'll be 2 playoffs on the 1st, 2 on the 2nd, and then the round of 8 will be 2 days later on the 4th.
Yeah,
sorry, round of 4.
First, second, and 5th for us in Korea is what I'm seeing here. So
and August 11th is the finals.
Sweet. Well, you definitely do not want to be missing those. As I was saying, Contenders Korea, I find it the most enjoyable region to watch outside of the Overwatch League. And even if I dare say so, sometimes more exciting than the Overwatch League. Is there anyone in here? No, I'm safe. I'm safe.
Fucking black bag just gets pulled over his head suddenly. He just gets dragged off. Oh man!
All right, thank you very much for joining me, guys.
It's Jeff Kaplan.
Yeah, I'm about to get back. Jeff's been waiting for me just to see if I was saying anything like that. He's gonna club me with the trophy that he was carrying in. It's just gonna have little smears of my blood on it when they present it to the Philadelphia Fusion. There you go. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll have to check back in probably after the season has concluded. It's gonna be sick. Catch the playoffs.